Greetings, everyone. Steve, here, Chords of Kindness. How you doing today? Hopefully your weaving's been happy. Hopefully this is just going to be a brief video. This is going to be tips and tricks. That's all this is going to be. Let's see. First off, shameless plug. Megalodon, or a Trilobite double jawbone. Put the description for the tutorial the link for the tutorial in the description below. Here's one in color, so you can see it a little bit better. Right? Now, this one, I don't have a tutorial for yet. I'm in the process of making one. In fact, that's what these two cords up here are for. But this is a double-stitched, modified jawbone. And I'll show you this, because if you don't point it out, it's kind of hard to see if we can get it in focus. You got orange stitching running down the side. Right here in the middle where this is the color of the cord is lava flow. It also has this little piece of yellow stitching. Very subtle, but it adds just enough of detail, right? But I'm working on making another one of these and filming it for a tutorial, hence the two cords up here. Now, okay, with that said, bam. Let's see. I throw this out to you. Here's your tip. I figured since I was going to talk about this right here, this thing, which I'll get to in just a second, I'll show you this. This is what I do. I know some people, when they go to weave a bracelet and they cut their cord, you know, this is the cord they're going to be working with, and they cut it off the hank or the spool or whatever it is, you know, however they store the cord, they will cut it and they'll leave it like that, and then they'll go to weave. I don't recommend that. My opinion, do what you want, but I don't recommend it. You get frayed ends, and it doesn't make for neat, clean, and tight. For those who watch my videos, you know that's my principles: neat, clean, and tight. And you know, I let my work speak for itself. But you know, we don't want it that way, right? And the more you sit and manhandle the cord and all that, it's gonna fray. These inner strands are going to stick out, and the outer sheath is going to draw back, and it's just not going to look right. So, this is what I do. This is what I would recommend doing, and this is what I do. When you go to weave, when you cut your cord that you're going to be weaving with off of, you know, however you store your cord, you cut and burn the end. Obviously, you cut it, but you burn the end of it. Now, there's a way I do this. I know a lot of people, they burn their hands. I hear people make comments all the time, I burn my fingers. Hey, I still burn my fingers every now and then. But this right here is a way to less likely to burn your hand, and it also serves another purpose, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, first off, if you've got it like this, we don't want it like that. We want an even, you know, thing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the end of that off, and I'll show you. We want it to be like this. We don't want them inner strands sticking out. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do, then I'm gonna show you. Why? Because it's a time sensitive. We're dealing with melted plastic, right? Well, what you do is you hold that cord up there and you get it hot, and you kind of rotate that cord around. You get it hot all around, and it gets a big ball of melted plastic, and you just let it sit there for a second and cool off. And then you take your fingers, and I know you'll say, they'll grab the end of it. No, do not grab the end of it. Grab it back here and kind of just, not a lot of pressure. Don't be pinching the cord. Just and rotate the cord. And what it does is it tapers the end of that. I'll show you. This is all you do right here. And it also, you see how it's not black, it's not burnt. It still maintains the relative color of the cord, right? Okay. So you just take it, kind of rotate that cord, get it melting. If it catches on fire, blow the flame out, but let it sit there for just a second. Let it cool off, and then reach back here and just do like that. Not a lot of pressure. All we're doing is kind of tapering it down. Now you can see where it's sticking to my fingers. You get the melted pizza string cheese effect. You get a little tiny piece that comes off, and that's fine. You just let it cool off, and once it cools off, you can reach up there and pop that little end off. But it leaves a sharp tip on there. Okay, so what you do is you come back like this. You come back, your fingers. Now that it's cooled off, and run your fingers down it. And feel if you have any hard edges, any burrs, or anything like that. Little places that might potentially snag on other cord. Because we don't want that. That doesn't make for neat or clean or tight, right? So we'll reach up there. And especially like if you got the string cheese effect and you broke it off the end, there's going to be a hard tip on the end. We got to get rid of all the hard tip and all the little burrs or potential snags. So we just come back and we just kind of give it a little once over real quick. That's it. And that melts that plastic just enough that it softens up all those edges. Let it harden up. I'm blowing on it. And then just reach up there and you can feel it. And there's no hard edges or anything like that. Now the reason I say there's no snag points, no burrs. And the reason I say that is because we all know this. If you use a jig, which if you don't, I highly recommend getting a jig. Making a jig, buying a jig, whatever. You go to Walmart or your local Hobby Lobby shop, hobby store, and get one for $25. Basic, simple jig. Use it and you'll see. It makes the world of difference trying to keep your bracelets neat, clean, and tight, right? But what happens is you got those core strands on that jig. And we all know. You take that one end and you got to go under here, over there, whatever. You got it through there. And to save time and to make it quick, you grab it and you pull the slack through. Well, if you got little burrs and snags on there, what potentially can happen is it catches on them core strands. It can cause a run. Now, granted, you're most likely going to weave over all those core strands with your bracelet, and you're not going to see them. But we want neat, clean, and tight, even our core strands. Just good working habits. Take pride in your work. We want it to look good, right? Does that make sense? That's why I do that. Okay, now, with that said, we'll go to the next thing. Now, hopefully I can do this on camera, and it's not going to make me out to be a liar. I'll say this. I've seen a lot of people say one of two things. You cannot meld polyester and nylon together. I've heard people say that. Yes, you can. I've also heard people say, well, you can, but the bond is not as strong. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I'm not a scientist. I've never done any scientific studies on this, but I bond these two together. Now, I know there are people out there that swear by what's known as the Manny method. Now, I've done that a few times, and, I've made some bracelets on it, and I just don't like it. I don't like it. That's my opinion. If you like it and that's what you use, go right ahead. But this is what I do. First off, if you don't know the difference, polyester, this is polyester, and this is nylon. If you don't know the difference, I'll tell you. People, for all the noobs out there, newbies, paracord is not always 100% nylon. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get what's known as a poly blend or a polyester and nylon, right? I'll explain to you. If you look here, I'll show you on this page so you can see. These inner strands, they will always be nylon. 100% nylon. The pink or the outer sheath, it's not necessarily nylon. Sometimes it's polyester. So you have a polyester and a nylon. Or it's all nylon, it's 100% nylon. Now, is there a difference? Yeah, one's polyester, one's nylon. Now, I know some people, well, I hate nylon, or I'd rather use polyester. It's all personal preference. But I'll say this. The polyester, like this right here, it tends to feel thicker. It's not actually a thicker cord. It just feels thicker because it's stiffer. That polyester is a little bit stiffer than nylon. So when you feel it and you touch it, you can tell. If you've got cord and you know this is polyester and you know that's nylon, reach up there and touch it. And, through just constant use, you'll eventually be able to tell which one's which just by touching them. Now, I know sometimes there's some nylon cord I've come across that feels like polyester, but it's not. It's nylon. But, nylon tends to be stiffer, coarser, if you will. And the nylon cord is softer, more supple, right? But weaving with them, there's not really that much of a difference. But people, like I said, people will say, you cannot meld the two. You can't melt the two ends together. Or people will say, well, it's not a strong bond. Well, the way I do this, I haven't had any issues with it. Now, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I do this and I don't get it right, and it does pull apart. When I test it and pull it, the two ends after I've melted them, sometimes they do come apart. It's because I didn't do it right. Just do it again, and, eventually you'll get it. But this is what I do. Like I said, like I did with the other one, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, because of the time-sensitive melted heat and all that. I'm going to tell you, and then I'll show you. I take the two cords in my hand, and I'll melt them. And then I'll flip them over and melt the other side and get a big ball of plastic on both of them. Then I'll take them and I'll stick the two ends of the big balls of melted plastic, stick them together, and kind of work them. And what that's doing is getting those two plastic cords kind of, mixing that liquid plastic, that molten plastic together. And then once it cools just a little bit, you can reach up there with your finger and kind of roll it, and it'll flatten it out. Does that make sense? That's what I do. Now, I'll do it, and I'll show you. And hopefully, this is going to hold together on camera. Sometimes, like I say, sometimes it doesn't hold together very well. But if you do it right, it will hold together. But you take your two here. Let's zoom in so we can see this. We're going to zoom in. Right? Okay. Now, you don't want, see how the inner strands are sticking? You don't want your inner strands like that. Right? When you go to do this, you want them to be relatively, you see what I'm saying? They're not sticking out a whole bunch. Okay? So you come at it, get your flame on one side, and then I'll flip them over and I'll put the flame on the other side. Does that make sense? And get two big balls of melted plastic on the end. And if it catches on fire and you see it kind of burnt, that's fine. Kind of go in between the two cords. Flip them over. Now, you take them quickly and kind of rotate them together. I almost got out of frame, but I didn't. But you do like that. Let it cool off just a little bit, and then reach up over your finger and kind of roll it in your fingers, and it'll flatten out that big glob. Right? Now, just let it sit there for a second. Let it kind of cool off a little bit. Because what'll happen is if you don't let it cool off completely, the outside of it will be a hard crust. But the inside will still be melted plastic. And if the bond hasn't solidified yet. So we want it to completely solidify, cool off completely all the way through. That way the bond is going to be stronger. Right? Now what I'll do, before I test this out, I'll reach up there and I'll feel of it. Just like I did on the end of this to make sure there's no burrs on it, I'll do the same thing with this. I'll run my fingers across this and feel it. And now obviously it's going to be a big, huge lump. You got your cord right here, and it's real thin, and you get to where that lump is, and it goes, brr, brr, big old huge, you know what I'm saying? You get there, and it's like, brr, brr, big old lump of plastic. And I know a lot of times if you're trying to thread all this, setting up your cord, and you're trying to thread this through a slot on the buckle, yeah, that right there doesn't want to go through the buckle. And I understand. That's where you got to learn how to set up your cord strands without having to thread that through. You set up your cord strand using one. Does that make sense? You do it enough, you'll figure out how to do it. But you can always come back. Like I say, you can do this right here. You come back and you feel it. And you'll run your fingers down. You can feel it's kind of it's kind of rough. It might have little burrs, little snag points on it. We want to get rid of those. So what I'll do is I'll just hold it, and I'll get heat on one side. Let it cool for a second, and then I'll smooth it. Then I'll rotate the cord, and I'll do the other side the same way. Does that make sense? Just hit it just a little bit, not much. And then rotate it to the other side. All we're doing is trying to soften up that outer crust. Ooh, that was a little hot. That's all we're doing is trying to soften up the outer crust. We're not trying to get the middle of it hot and melty again. But now, we're just going to let it sit there, and we're going to let it cool off. Now, I'm going to back up and let you see this. I'll show you what I'm going to do. Let it cool off. This is the thing. This is the key. When you get them two big balls of melted plastic and you put them together and you kind of work them together and you do all that, that's the first key, is melting them two balls and getting them kind of mixed, the liquid plastic mixed. That's the first key. The second one is to let this thing cool off completely. Now, I'm going to show you. Like I say, hopefully this is not going to make me a liar on camera. But you can take this. You can take this. I'm going to put some pressure on it. It's holding. Now, remember, we're not using this, you know, you've seen it's on the label if you buy it in the hobby store. If you go on a paracord supply web, you know, wholesale web, online buying paracord, you know what I'm saying? It tells you this is not a lifeline. You're not going to be, your life is not going to be hanging by this meld. So how strong does it have to be? You see, I'm pulling on that. Look at my fingers. Watch them, they'll turn white. I'm pulling it. It's not coming apart. Polyester, nylon. You can meld this stuff together. It works. If you do that, that's the method I've used for the longest. Take them two ends, burn them at the same, hold them in one hand and burn them. Flip them over and get a big ball of plastic, melted plastic, and then quickly take them and put them together. You get them together, kind of work them a little bit, and it gets that liquid plastic, mixes the two. And then let it cool for a second. Reach up a wee finger and roll it, and it smooths it out. And then just let it cool off. And then come back and feel it, because it'll be sharp, crusty edges and all that. Hit it again from one side and kind of smooth it out, and then rotate it and hit it again from the other side. And once you do that, just let it sit there and completely cool off. And, you know, it's pretty strong. It's pretty strong. And for those who have watched my videos, you've seen me put my core strands on my jig and the amount of pressure I put on them. That's going to hold. That will hold. Now, granted, like I said, sometimes I put it on that jig and I crank down that pressure on them, or that tension on them core strands, and it comes loose. I've had it happen. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you do this, it makes for a pretty strong bond, and it's relatively strong, and even with the tension I use, it holds on that jig and all that tension I put on it. So, you know, don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't meld the two, polyester and nylon. It can be done. You saw me do it right there. Now watch it go snap. But it holds. Now, with all that said, like I said, check out the tutorial for this one. I'm going to be filming these two cores actually right here. I'm going to be making one of these. I'm going to tell you, this stealth olive, I know it's kind of hard to see. It's a stealth olive color. It's a really dark olive. It's darker than olive drab. This is a shockwave. You can see this. This is shockwave, which is basically zigzags that go around the thing. It's olive and black. And then I'm going to be doing the double stitch with our basic olive drab, and then this color, which is moss. So the whole bracelet is going to have like an olive, you know, motif, olive palette, if you will. Right? But that's what I'm going to be doing today. And I'm going to be making this one and filming it today. And I'll get the bracelet and I'll film done. And I'll most likely get it uploaded. I may get it uploaded and all that. You know, for those of you who know anything, it takes filming this stuff and then editing and all that. And I'm not a filmmaker, but I know the basics. It takes a while. It takes a little while to do all this and to upload it and all that. So, you know, and the next day or two, I'll get this tutorial for this one uploaded, and you can check that out. But give us a like, give us a share, you know, subscribe. I appreciate all the new subscribers. I've seen my subscribers list going up, and I appreciate that. Thank you. But you know, like I say, stick around and just watch my videos, and I'll show you. I'll show you how to make a paracord bracelet. But with that, I'll end this one like I end them all. Keep it neat, keep it clean, and keep it tight. Happy weaving, folks.